Roland just dropped the new update for the SP404 Mark II, firmware update 3.0, which these improvements, these workflow improvements on the 404 now making beats and working with samples. The workflow is just 10 times better with this update. Where do we even begin? Working with patterns is so much easier for a lot of reasons. So if I go into my pattern select and I play you some of the patterns, you're just gonna hear different variations, right? Some with kick, some with no kick, some with no drums, some with top percussion, some with more like melodic layers. Right? So all those different variations of patterns. But what has gotten so much easier now to make all those versions of those patterns like you do in a song. Now, instead of having to record every single version of those into a new pattern, we can now copy a pattern, like this is my most full pattern here, and then we can press Remain to select the samples we want to copy. So let's say I actually don't want any kick or any snare. Let's only do the chords. I can hold these and see what these are. And my like vocal sample stuff. That's fine. Let's keep that effects. Let's even keep that little cymbal. So now we will not keep the hi-hat, this snare, or that kick. I'm going to turn those off. Okay, we've selected the samples. Now let's go to copy. Go back to the page where we can copy over, hit Remain again. And let's copy this over to pattern 4. I believe I did that right. So now we have a version of pattern 2 without all the extra samples on top, without the drums, with just the chords, just that little cymbal hit, and just some of the vocal samples that will come in later. So that's so easy. If I want to make a version with just the drums, let's try that. Let's copy it over. Let's copy it over to 3. Now let's press Remain. Let's only do drums. Press copy. So easy. So that's the number one thing. That is golden workflow stuff. Here's another great one. Let's say instead of working with patterns like this, let's find a good one. This one is fine. Here's a full pattern, but maybe I actually want to work with this full pattern as a sample. So this pattern contains a bunch of samples, right? It contains drums, it contains chords, it contains other samples, vocal samples, effects, and things. So I want to basically bounce this to audio. So let's go back to pattern select. Let's select our pattern here. I'm going to hit copy. Now that I've hit copy and selected the pattern that I want, going ahead to hit pattern select again. And now we are actually copying this pattern so that we can bounce it as a sample. Let's find an empty slot and an empty bank to put this in. Let's put it on D4. Then when I hit copy, it's going to bounce this as audio to that sample slot in bank D, pad 4. This takes obviously a little bit longer than when you're just bouncing a pattern, which is kind of just like MIDI information. This is actually bouncing audio. Anytime I've used the 404 in videos here on this channel, I love sampling things into oblivion, coming up with something, sampling it, messing with it, sampling it again, things like that. So now we have this as a full pattern, as a full sample, I should say. We have the pattern as a full sample. So let's say I want to take this kind of upbeat hip hop style beat and perhaps turn it into a slower vaporwave style beat. We could slow it down. That snare That other snare becomes very out of tune when I mess with the pitch there. But you see, we just took that pattern, bounced it to a sample. And then of course, what can you do from there? I mean, you could chop it if you wanted to. Assign those chops to a pad or something. I want to find a blank bank. There we go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Enter. Oh. So basically now we bounce that pattern to a sample. There's a bunch of different things you can do with it, like we pitched it down. But now what we've also done is chopped it. Let me bounce over and show off another feature here. So what I have here is actually a bunch of one-shots in this bank, and beats B and G, banks B and G. I have a bunch of one-shots, and you know, my intention there was I could play the beat, hop over here, for whatever the reason, if you're working with one-shots in a similar way, or for like any of the stuff in your pattern, a lot of times in your banks, you want to be able to edit all of the sounds in the banks. Like there's edits you might have to do and go in and change one by one. No more. No longer do you have to change certain settings one by one for each sample in a bank. Now we can edit a lot of the parameters for a full bank. So what's one thing we might want to change here? Well, let's say I have this instrument. Now, if I want to change, maybe I want to transpose this instrument. Maybe all of a sudden I've decided to put my song into a different key. If I hold the remain button, now any changes that I make are going to apply to the entire bank. So let's pitch the entire bank down 2 semitones. So now the whole bank, we've adjusted 2 semitones. So like oftentimes when I'm chopping samples, like we kind of just did, all of them have that little snap at the beginning or end. So it would be helpful if we could actually edit the envelope of every single thing in this bank, like the attack and the release, which is new. Now we can also adjust the release of these samples. No more click. Because we've adjusted the envelope for the entire thing. So obviously that's really helpful if you have a bank full of melodic or harmonic stuff. Let's say you want to transpose your song all at once, change the entire bank, the transposition, change the envelope of the entire bank, attack, hold, and release, the pitch and the speed, the volume. That's another huge thing. Let's say you've decided that your whole bank is too loud. Well, I remember chopping a bunch of samples and going in and you click every sample, you adjust the volume for every sample, and you have to do that 16 times. You don't have to do that anymore. How about quantizing specific samples in a pattern, right? Maybe you want to keep your snare a little off. Maybe you want to keep your kick a little behind or ahead of the beat. But your chords, maybe your chords need to be locked in. Let's go to any given pattern here. We select our pattern via the pattern edit menu. Then we click record setting. And then we get a quantize button here. And you can select which pads you want to quantize. So if I go to bank A, I have all my samples that are available in this pattern. I could quantize, say, just my chords. And for those 4 individual pads, I can change the quantization grid and the strength of the quantization. It will give you a prompt that say, you cannot undo this. That's fine. Great. Now we've quantized just a certain set of samples. Okay, if you want to create variations of your patterns, play this pattern. Let's go into record mode. What you might actually want to do is play with some of the on-offs of these pads. Maybe we lose kick for a moment, maybe we lose snare for a moment, create a more dynamic drum pattern. We can do that now. Shift, reverse, remain. Shift, reverse, remain. So now we've recorded that, but we can also record not only pad mutes, but we can record the motion, like automation of our effects now too. If we go into record mode for this pattern, we gotta let it play through, of course, but we're gonna press the mark button. Did you all see that? Motion record start. Motion record is their terminology for automation here. So when it comes back around to beat 1 of bar 1, we'll be recording. There we go. And now you'll see that automation has been recorded. Motion recording, motion recording. You can see the numbers changing. You can even, you can also automate just effects on and off. You don't have to just be turning knobs. One other thing that got included in this update, though, we can now actually select the 404 Mark II app as a plugin within our DAW. Hit connect. You want to make sure you don't have it set as both an input device and this. This is now, it's going to act as essentially a MIDI track. But now we can very easily manage what's going on our 404. Even you can see, like, as I'm pressing samples here, the plugin in the app, as expected, is reacting in real time. Boom. There we go. It's here. Straight from the DAW. So if you're thinking about converting your DAW sessions into live sessions on the 404, this suddenly makes things a lot easier. But remember some of the stuff we talked about before. Here how we've got that little click on the top. Don't forget that we can go into envelope. Hold remain. Do a little bit of a slight fade in on the attack. So we can go to pitch, hold remain. Let's slow this down and tune it down. Again, doing that all at once.